Okay, so to switch to the trigger editor, hit these two little gear buttons from either the terrain editor or the data editor, and it'll bring up the trigger editor. And by default, you'll just have one trigger that sets up the melee initialization stuff for regular StarCraft 2 games. So we can keep this trigger, which is on the left here, but delete the actions inside this trigger because we still want to do some stuff on the map initialization. Now that kind of stuff we want to do is you want to bring up a race choosing dialog, so you can choose what race you want to be, I guess, for each player. Right now it's only going to be 2. So to begin, let's start within the actions here, and the order does matter of the actions, so follow me on that one. The first action you want to do is dialog, create a dialog, and dialogs are basically just windows that you can bring up with buttons and images and whatever else you like. Modal means that it'll lock out all other controls except for this dialog, and that doesn't actually work right now, but I'm setting it in advance when Blizzard does make it work. And based on previous testing, I'm going to go by 400 by 300 at 0, 0 relative to the center of the screen. So that's perfect. So it'll be right at the center. And but now we realize, now you would realize after some time that when you do need to hide the dialog later, you need a way to reference it. And if you're a programmer, you know we use variables to reference things. So on the left side here where we have our trigger, right-click and go New Variable. And we're going to name this to be race dialog. And change the type to be dialog. And that's all we got to do there. So back in our melee initialization trigger, which I should just rename to initialization, I hit F2 to rename, by the way. Right after this first action, Control W to add another action, or you could right-click and add new action. Look for variable, set variable. And we're going to set race dialog, which was already selected, to be value function last created dialog. So now we have it stored in something permanent that'll be global throughout the entire length of this game, that we can reference this dialog specifically. But this dialog needs some stuff on it. So right after this action, what we'll need to do is add some buttons. So let's go add a new action, Control W, and dialog, create dialog item brackets button. And we're going to create it for the last created dialog. We could change this and set it to variable race dialog, but not a big deal since last created dialog is referencing this action right here. And the reason we can't use last created dialog 20 minutes into the game after this is because this reference only pertains to this trigger. So it'll lose that reference if we try to do it in a different trigger. And the dimensions, which I've worked out already, 130 by 130, anchored to the left, which is the left middle, with an offset of 50, 0. So the offset will be 50 from the left wall of the dialog in the X direction, in the horizontal plane. And the tooltip is going to be choose the Sun team. This team is adept at fast shots and long range. Pretty generic, but just to get the point across. And as for the button text, we're just going to click that and set it to nothing because it's going to be an image type button. But you can't set that here, so we fake it by putting another dialog item of an image over top of this button. Anyway, we will need to reference this this button in as a variable as well, because we will need to get what button they press. So we're going to copy this variable we made on the left here, and let's call this choose Sun team button. I'm trying to be very direct on my naming here, and change the type to a dialog item, and copy paste that and change this to be choose shadow team button, and that can stay the same type. And now in our initialization, copy the variable set race dialog and paste it below this button. And we're going to set this to choose Sun team button to equal, click on value, function, last created dialog item. So this variable will be set to this last created dialog item, which was this thing right here. And later we can check if they press this or the other one. So we can copy paste both of these now actually. And there we go. Let's change it. So it's going to be 130, 130, anchored to the right. And if you had like 4 or 5 races, you couldn't probably anchor it as easily as I'm doing right here. I'm just anchoring one button from the left and one from the right and then offsetting them. You'll have to change your anchors up probably. This one's going to be anchored to the right with an offset of 50. And you'll notice it's a positive 50 because the offset is in the opposite direction of the wall. So if I'm anchoring to the left, an offset of 50 will be to the right. From here to the right. if I'm anchoring to the right wall, the offset of positive 50 will anchor towards the left. We'll offset it towards the left, so good to know that. And the tooltip, it's going to be choose the shadow team. This team is adept at low range and high damage. Okay, and we can leave those two the same. And now let's change the variable to be set choose shadow team button to equal last created dialog item. And that's good. The buttons are there, but they're going to be pretty boring. So we need to actually fake an image on top of the buttons. So let's see. We're going to go to dialog, create dialog item, image. So we can see we have this new thing here. And by the way, most of these numbers that I'm putting in, I've already gone through and I've figured out they're good, but it does take a lot of guessing testing to get the right numbers. So the dimensions has to be the same, or it should be the same, so that it fits nicely on the button. Anchor to make it the same as the other one, left with an offset of 50, 0. And the tooltip's nothing. And the image now is where we're going to choose the probe image. And actually, that's one thing we should fix in the data editor. I know I just forgot something. We're going to choose probe for this image, but we want to use probe dark for the shadow team. So I'm going to go do that right after this action. As a normal type with tiled set to false, and the rest can stay the same. So quick trip back to the data editor. Our shadow builder, for the actor here, what we want to do, the first thing is find the unit icon, and let's change this to be the dark probe or whatever. I think it's a pretty cool idea for the, or it's not called the dark probe, is it? I better just search for probe. I think it's a pretty cool idea that they made a shadow version of the probe that worked out perfectly for me. Probe dash dark, okay. We'll copy that on the hero icon. And then another cool thing we can do is tint the shadow builder really dark. So if you go into actor events here, events plus, double click and ignore all these other ones. On the last thing here, right click, add event. And the event is going to be actor creation, leave the rest. So whenever this actor is created, the action is going to be set tint color. And there's lots of other stuff you can do in there, so take a look. And we're going to set the color to be black with an HDR multiplier of 2, so it makes it more extreme. And that's all we're going to do. So it's just going to be really dark, like a shadow kind of, like you saw in my demo. I think I picked the shadow team, I'm not sure. And that's a bit better. So back in here, we made our little button for the sun team, and then we're going to copy this action to put an image on the shadow button. And we're going to create an image for last created dialog, except anchor to the right. And this is where we change the image to be of the dark probe for the so-called shadow team that I made up, which takes a while to load. So many images. Oh, nice, it's right above it. Sweet. That worked out well. And okay, that's done. And then the last thing we're going to do is to show the dialog. So let's see, where is dialog, new action? It should be at the bottom. Show / hide dialog. Change it to be show instead of hide. Show last created dialog for all players. And we can change this all players actually to be active players, which will be any player that's a computer or user, but still better than all players. And we do want to set the title of this. So somewhere in here before show, add a new action, dialog, set dialog title. We're going to set the title last created dialog to choose your race. And I'm going to move this up here actually. Could be anywhere as long as it's after this first action because it's referencing the last created dialog. And that's pretty much it for the dialog. So that'll be popping up at the start. We'll need to respond to that later, but I'll take care of that in a bit. Let's put a little, after the last action here, let's do a new comment, and let's just put some dashes to leave a little space between our next actions. So our next actions is going to actually initialize the waves, but we will need some variables to do that. The way we're going to spawn the waves is we're going to store a giant list of all the wave types and all of how many units it should spawn, and then we just say, okay, we're on wave 0. Let's go to item number 0 on the list. It says to do this, and then we'll increment the wave count as it goes, and then we'll just go to number 2 in the list, number 3 in the list, and then it'll automatically be spawning the right unit for each wave. So to start, let's make a new comment over here as well to kind of give some space between our different variables. We do make variables in both triggers over here, so it's good to split them up or even use folders to split them up. I won't be using that though for this one. So let's add a new variable, and let's call it wave types. Simple as that. The type is going to be unit type. Make sure it's unit type and not just unit. And it's going to be an array of size 40. An array is just a list of this variable. And size 40 is good, so we're kind of thinking to the future if we had 40 waves. And copy paste this, and let's call this wave counts. And this is how many on each wave is going to spawn, so we could specify if there's only one, if it's a boss wave or something. And this is going to be type integer, an array of size 40. And then we will need another variable, so copy paste, and let's call this current wave iteration, and uncheck array, and just leave it as integer. And then let's copy paste that, and let's call this number of waves. And don't change anything except click on the initial value here. It might be hidden. Sometimes Blizzard does it like that, and you have to drag this thing up to see it, and then you click on the 0 and change it to 2, because I just made two different monsters, the weakling and the not so weakling. So this number here we can update as we add more, or you got to remember to update it. So back in initialization, so what was the point of those variables? Well, let's make a new action here, variable, set variable, and let's set wave types 0 to equal, and now we're going to search for the weakling and hit OK. And then let's set wave types 1 to equal the not so weakling. So as you can see, it's like a list, right? The 0th item is the first item, the 1th item or whatever is the second item. Is 1th index, I mean. And it's of size 40 right now, so we have lots of buffer room. We don't have to worry about hitting the max. But we also need to set the wave count. So copy paste one of those. Instead of set wave types, we're going to do set wave counts. And we're going to set wave count 0 to equal maybe 12 or on the first wave, and then copy paste that and paste it after wave types 1. And we're going to set wave counts 1 to be 14, sorry. So it gets a little bit harder. And you could keep going once you add more waves, and maybe on the 10th wave is a boss wave, so you just put a 1 in there as the count. And that's all we need to do to kind of set up the waves. And now we're going to make actually the timer that appears on the top right with the leaderboard and all that. So, and all the player alliances. You'll notice when we made the map in map player properties at the start, we didn't set any player alliances, and you generally don't do it through here. So it's good to do it in triggers because you have more of an idea of exactly what's going on. So let's copy the comment on the left as well. So we have another breakpoint in here. And let's copy a variable, paste it down at the bottom of this list, and let's call this timer, and change the type to timer. Okay, and copy paste this and change it to be timer window. And let's change the type to be a timer window. So we do need to store both of these in a variable because we need to hide them and show them as time, or as time goes on, I guess. And now we can go back into our initialization trigger. And we can go add a new action, which is timer, start a timer. And start, and click on timer, and it's already set to our variable. Perfect. As a one-shot timer that will expire in 30 game time seconds. And let's copy paste this action, and let's change it to be timer create timer window. Create a timer window for last start a timer with the title wave begins. And we'll just leave it as that, and that'll be appearing beside the number as it counts down using remaining time. And now let's set some variables. So new action variable, set timer window to equal function last created timer window, and then another new action. We're going to show the window now. Timer show last created timer window for all players. Change it to active players. Just a little bit more efficient. And we didn't have to set the variable for this timer because it chooses it from here. So nicely enough, we don't have to actually do another set timer to equal last created timer. So let's do some basic startup stuff now. So after that, let's add another break, and let's do some startup stuff like moving your camera and stuff. So let's do a new action, and this is going to be player group. Pick each player in player group, and instead of all players, make it active players. So this is like a loop. So it's going to loop through each active player and do these set of actions on those players, or it could just be one player. So who knows? And what we're going to do is first action, camera, pan the camera for player. Instead of a set number, we're going to go function picked player. So that refers to each player as we loop through. So as this is looping through player 1, 2, 3, 4, picked player is going to refer to that number. To the center of the playable map area over 0 seconds, so it's right away. The player doesn't even know that they start there, or doesn't know that we secretly did it over 0 seconds. And the next action is going to be visibility. Create a revealer. Yes, create a revealer for player function picked player within area function playable map area. So this way every player can see the whole map. And then we're going to set the starting resource. So another new action, player, modify player property. Modify player, instead of 0, make it function picked player. Minerals set to, what's a good starting amount? 30. And now we can add another breakpoint. Make sure you paste it below this action, not inside here, because we only want these 3 actions to run for each player, and then we want to move on here to something else. So let's add a new action, and now we're going to do the player alliances. And I'm just powering through this because I think it's fairly obvious what I'm doing. It just needs to get done, so I gotta just hammer through it. So let's set alliance for player group. It's the first action we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is make each player in function active players as an enemy. So I'm going to make everyone an enemy, and then I'm going to ally people off as needed. So next action is going to be player set alliance, and we're going to make player 1 and 2 treat each other as an ally with shared vision. And then we're going to make players 3 and 4 treat each other as an ally as well. And that's vice versa with this action. And now we need to make players 3 and 4 make players 3 and 6 treat each other as neutral, because player 6 is going to be the mob spawning from this side, and player 5 is going to be the mob spawning from this side, this is 3 and 4, 1 and 2. So 3 and 6 are going to be neutral, and 4 and 6 are going to be neutral. And then we'll also want to copy paste and make 1 and 5 to be neutral, and copy paste, and we want 2 and 5 to be neutral. So that covers all that. And let's copy the comment so we have another break there. And one thing we will need to do once you choose your hero is add some spawn point variables. So it'll make our lives easier later, and you'll see why. So let's add another breakpoint in the left side here. I'm calling them breakpoints, they're just dash comments. But anyways, let's add a new variable. Let's call this player spawn points of type point. And it's going to be an array of size 4 since we have 4 players. A list of size 4 basically. And what we're going to do is a new action in our initialization trigger here, variable, set variable, and we're going to set player spawn points 1, starting from 1 here because player 1 is 1, to be 0.1. Set player spawn points 2 to equal 0.2. Set player spawn points 3 to equal 0.3. And come on, I'm going as fast as I can. 0.4, okay. So now that's set, and that'll come in handy when we're reacting to what race they chose, because we'll need to spawn their unit at their player numbers spawn point, which would be a lot of work if we didn't have it in a nice little list. And let's copy the break, and now we're going to do the long sort of leaderboard actions. So this is going to be a good leaderboard tutorial if you wanted that out of this too. Let's add a new action, and let's start out with leaderboard, create leaderboard. Start it at the very top here. And we're going to create a leaderboard with 2 columns and 7 rows. And why 7 rows? Well, I worked this out earlier. So we're going to have 2 rows for the first 2 players, and then a row for the left side lives, and then a row for a dash line, and then 2 rows for the right side players, and then the last row is the right side lives. So 7 works out as that magical number. And with the name, let's just call this versus TD. And that color's fine. Now, if you want to be a bit more advanced, you can make your leaderboard so that if a player's not active, it actually removes their row. But you would actually have to do some more math and store what row a player's on, because if player 2 is gone from the game, that means player 3 and 4 and right side lives, those rows on the leaderboard would be actually shifted up one. So you actually have to store that specifically. You can't use a set number. Whereas what I'm going to do now is just say if a player's not there, I'm going to leave their row in the leaderboard. It's just going to say not playing, which is not as clean, but is much easier to do and much easier to show. So once you get more advanced, you can kind of go into that stuff. And it's probably in some of my maps that I've released. The leaderboard probably has that code in it anyway, if you look on my channel. So we need a variable, though, to reference this leaderboard when we need to do updates to it. So let's add another breakpoint, and let's add a new, let's copy paste one of these variables, and let's call this leaderboard. Change the type to leaderboard and uncheck array in case it was checked. And back in initialization, I'm going to copy one of these set variables, paste it after our last action, and I'm going to set leaderboard to equal value function last created leaderboard. And there we go. So now it's set for eternity while our map's playing. You can reference it forever. So now we need to set the header row so it'll say player and kills, as you saw on my leaderboard when I demoed this. So let's add a new action, leaderboard, set leaderboard item text, set last created leaderboard item text at column 1 and row preset header to be player, and then copy paste this, and column 2 in row header is going to be kills. And we'll hit OK. And that's good. And now we're going to do the first player. So, and I'm going to do this in a nice way so you can see how to use an if statement. So new action, general, if then else. And we're going to control W on the if here, and comparison, hit OK. Click on the left bracket of owner of triggering unit down here, and change it to be player status of player. If status of player 1 equals preset playing, so if the player 1's playing, then inside the then block here, we're going to add some actions. We're going to, let's see, leaderboard, set leaderboard item text. We're going to set last create leaderboard item text at column 1 and row 1 to be, click on text, function, player, name of player, and it's going to be name of, instead of triggering player, click on that and change it to be player 1. And copy paste, and let's change this to be column 2 now, and row 1, which is for the first player, and let's change this text to just be 0, because this will be their starting kills, so it's going to be 0. And we want to change the color too, so it's matching the player. So after this first little action we did here, control W, and we're going to do leaderboard, set leaderboard item text color, and we're going to set it for column 1 and row 1. And instead of just a set color here, we're going to go to function, convert player color to color, and we want the current color of, instead of triggering player, pick just player 1, which is red usually, but, and copy paste this action after the second one, and we change this to column 2. So now it's going to be red for row 1, and it's going to have the right name of the player, and 0. However, if the player is not playing, which is under the else thing here, we're going to set the we're going to set two things. So copy paste the first two actions here, and we're going to set the text of column 1 and row 1 to be the name of that player still. Actually, no, sorry, not the name of that player. We're going to click on the left bracket of name of player 1, switch it to value, and just make it not playing. And oops, there we go. And then the color of that, we're not going to use this advanced formula function here. We're going to switch back to value, and we're going to just make it a dark gray like that. That'll probably be a good indicator that it's a not playing row. And well, one thing we want to do here is basically we're going to have to copy this for players 2, 3, and 4. But a little bit of thinking ahead, we do need a new a variable on the left here. So copy paste one of the variables like leaderboard, and let's call this left has player z brackets s. and change the type to be Boolean. And then copy paste this and change it to be right has players. So this is how we're going to detect. If the left side has no players, then we'll just spawn for the right side so that you can play solo. And if the right side has no players, then we'll just spawn left side. And I'll show you, I'll do this logic later, but we'll need these two. So back in our initialization here, because we've just checked that player 1 is playing, we're going to set that variable to be true. So we're going to set variable set left, where is it? Left has players to equal true, and check it off. And so now, because we know player 1's playing, we know that the left side has at least one person, so we definitely want to be spawning mobs there later. And we'll do that check later. But we're doing the sort of legwork ahead of time here. And so then let's copy paste this whole thing and paste it below. So I started from there and I pasted and it went fully below. Make sure you see the dashed line goes straight down from the previous top level action. And status of player 2. If status of player 2 is playing, then we're going to set left side as players to true, because player 1 might have not been here. So this will reaffirm it. And if they're both here, it doesn't matter. First thing we want to do is column 1 in row 2 to be name of player 2. Column 1 and row 2 to be color of current player 2 color. And column 2 and row 2 to be 0. Column 2 and row 2 to be the current color of player 2. And then the item text at column 1, and this is in the case of the player 2 is not here, in column 1 and row 2, and column 1 and row 2. And you might be saying, well, you're doing a lot of repeating here. Why don't you throw that into a loop just like you did with these player things over here? And I would normally do that, but because we have the two lines in between the lives and the dashed line on our leaderboard, player 3 and 4 can't really be as easily, like they're going to have really weird row numbers, so that's the reason I'm doing this manually for every player. And after player 2's been added to this leaderboard here, we actually want to do not a player, we want to set the lives. So add a new action, leaderboard, set item text, and make sure it's right after the full if statement. And we're going to set last created leaderboard item text at column 1 and row 3, which is the next row. We're going to set that to text, click on it, and change it to function, string, combine text. And text 1, let's change that to be left lives colon space. Hit OK. And by the way, you can't hit, if you want to hit enter in here to hit OK, you notice that you hit enter and it just goes down there. If you hit tab twice and then hit enter, it'll close it. Just a little trick I found out. So we've got the left lives, and then we want to set this to actually be the left player's lives. Well, now I realize, well, we don't actually have any variable storing the lives. So on the left side, once again, we're copy pasting and make a new variable, call this left lives, type integer. Copy paste that, rename it to right lives, and it's going to be integer. And make the initial value for both of these 30. So each side gets 30 lives. And that's how you do that. So back in initialization now, let's see. We're going to set it to left lives, and instead of text2 being some text, we're going to go function, conversion, convert integer to text. Instead of the 0, we're going to do variable left lives. So it's going to be 30, right? It's going to say left lives colon space 30 the first time we run this, since both the lives start at 30. And then let's copy paste this action, and we're going to set it at column 1 and row 4, and click on the left bracket of left lives and change it back to a value instead of a function. And let's just make a dash, a lot of dashes. So it's a split between the left and the right on the leaderboard. Just a little simple trick there, I guess. And now let's copy paste the status of player 2 if then else thing from the very top here, as I'm doing, and paste it below because we need to do player 3 now. So if the status of player 3 is playing, we're going to set right has player equal to, oops, not that one, set right has player equal to true, because we know at least one player is on the right side now. We're going to set the item text at column 1 and row 5. So make sure you get that number right, because we skip 2 rows after these two things, to be the name of player 3. And we want row 5 here to be current player color of player 3. and then row 5 for that, row 5, and player 3. And if you're a more advanced user, you're wondering, why am I not using a function to do this? So I could put this all into one line. It's because for new people, it's really confusing to do that. That's the sole reason. So I'm doing it all manually typed out. And row 5 for that, and row 5 for that. So player 3 is taken care of if he's active or not. And let's copy paste this, and we're going to do this for player 4 now. And we're almost done with the initialization trigger. And right has players is true, and now we're going to go row 6 to be name of player 4. The color of row 6 to be the color of player 4. And the kills to be 0. Sorry, I know this is boring, but I gotta document everything I do, so if you get lost, you can actually see me doing it. And row 6 for that. There we go. And then, of course, one last thing you want to do is show the right lives. So copy paste the left lives action we had above. Click on this if at the top level, and then paste, so it'll be at the very bottom. And last create leaderboard item at row 7 to be right lives, with a space on the end, and conversion instead of left lives is going to be right lives. And make sure your actions are all correct. I can't tell you how many times people have made tiny little mistakes and they can't figure out why it's not working. So, but luckily I'm making a text version of this tutorial, so that should help with that department. And I'm going to save, and now we can start doing the race chosen trigger when you choose your race. So this is how we add a new trigger. On the left here, anywhere we can go new trigger, and let's call this race chosen. And we need to react to when a player presses the dialog that we had. So add a new event, Control W with the event selected. Dialog item is used. And any dialog item is used by any player with event type clicked. Now we're going to do action, dialog, show/hide dialog. We're going to hide. Now this is where our variable came in handy, because last created dialog would actually refer to nothing right here, because there is no last created dialog within this trigger. We need to actually reference variable race dialog, which was set in initialization, which already would have happened by this point of the game time. So that's all good to go. Except we don't really want to like hide it for all players. That wouldn't really make sense if one person clicked it. So we want to convert player to player group, a simple little function. And instead of one, we want to go function triggering player. And you're wondering, why the hell am I choosing triggering player? Well, if you look at the event here, it says use triggering player to get the player that used the dialog item. So it tells us exactly what we need to do to reference that player number or whatever. And then now we got to check which button they press. So general, if, then else. New condition in the if thing, comparison, okay. And click on the left brackets of owner of triggering unit. And then search for, or just type used dialog item. Use dialog item equals to variable choose sun team button, which was set also in our initialization right there perfectly. So we know if they press the choose sun team button, then we are going to create the sun builder for them. So new action in the side of the then block, and go to unit, create unit facing angle, create one, let's see, sun builder, I think it was, yeah. Create one sun builder for player function triggering player. We want to make sure it's the right player at point. And now here's where you'd be like, okay, so which point do I choose? If you hadn't made these player spawn points variable, you'd be like, okay, well, how do I know which point to spawn it at? I can't just choose point 1, because what if this trigger was reacting to player 3 clicking? And then you'd have to go, well, if it's player 1, make it at point 1. If it's player 2, make it at point 2. If it's player 3, make it at point 3, and so on. And that's just a lot of actions in a trigger. That's a lot of grunt work that you don't need to do. So you just switch to variable here and go player spawn points, and instead of 0, choose function triggering player. So what this will do is it'll say player 3 clicked the sun team. So it's going to go, yes, player 3 clicked. It's going to hide it for player 3. It's going to say, yes, they clicked the sun team button. It's going to go into here, and it's going to create a sun builder for them at player spawn points brackets 3, because triggering player would be referencing player 3. And player spawn points 3, if we look back in here, we set it to be point 3. So then player 3 will get a guy there. And that's sort of how variable and arrays work. That's the advantage. because triggering player is just a number, so it can reference this position, this index in the list or array or whatever you want to call it. So we create the sun builder for that player, and facing doesn't matter and whatever, and then copy paste this action and make sure it's below if use dialog item equals choose shadow team button. We want to create one shadow builder for the triggering player. That the rest is good. And now we want to do some stuff like camera panning. So after the last if statement, Control W, camera, pan the camera. Make sure it's outside of both of these. Make sure it's not like sitting inside the else there. Make sure it's sitting fully out by dragging it like that. So you can see the dashed line. So we're going to pan the camera for player, function triggering player, to variable player spawn points, function triggering player. So we're going to check which button they pressed, and depending on that, we're going to make a specific unit. However, we can take this outside of the if statements because in both cases we want to pan the camera. So there's no point in me putting this in here and copy pasting it and putting it in here as well. In both cases, we're going to pan the camera after this unit is made. So we're going to pan the camera to that point over, I don't know, 1 second's probably decent. So it has a nice little animation over. And then we're also going to do another action, which is unit selection, select unit, select last created unit for player, and select function triggering player. So that's a nice little tip to get them to select their unit. And let's save. And now the race choosing is done. And the next step will be the actual spawning, which is going to be interesting. The way this TD works is that every 30 seconds or whatever, next wave comes. So it's just a constant onslaught of waves, and you've just got to see who can last the longest with their lives. And so the spawn trigger, we're going to add a new trigger now. On the left side here, let's call this spawn waves. And the event is going to be when, add a new event when the timer expires, and then click on timer and set it to variable that we made of that timer, which ironically I named the same thing as timer, which I probably should have named this variable a little bit different, but if it's not confusing, then it's good. And it's good enough for me. Now, first thing we want to do is display next wave or current wave, wave 2 Hydralisk or whatever. So first action is going to be UI text message. That's how you display a text message to the users. It doesn't send them a message on their iPhone or BlackBerry, don't worry. So you click on message here, and let's go to function string combine text multiple, because we're going to have quite a few here. So the first thing we're going to do is click on text, the red little text, and we're going to type in wave space and hit OK. And now if you have this little window, this little intermediate window here, if you right click on the text plus thing here and you go new parameter, and then this is going to be function conversion convert integer to text, and you can see it actually added it now after wave space. So the next text that's going to be concatenated onto wave space is going to be a number, and that's going to be the current wave index. So however, current wave index starts at 0 because we're counting in computer language, which starts at 0. So we're going to have to change, we're going to have to do function math arithmetic, and we're going to have to change value 1 to be current wave iteration. So it'll be wave space the current iteration plus 1. So if it was wave 0, it'll appear as wave 1 to the user, which I think is more user friendly than seeing wave 0. And they'll be like, what? How can you be at wave 0? It doesn't exist. So anyways, and we're going to display that for all players. But then you might be thinking, well, what if you want to see the name of the wave 2, like wave 4 : space Zerglings? So why don't we add that? So let's click on this text plus thing, add a new parameter, and this is just going to be a colon. You've got to kind of visualize it in your head because it's going to be wave space 4, for instance, colon, and we actually want a space after the colon, before the name of the unit. And then we're going to right click on the plus here again and go new parameter, and then we're going to go function unit name of unit type, name of, instead of unit type of triggering unit, click on the left bracket of unit type and change it to variable wave types, and instead of 0, variable current wave index. So it's going to be the name of the type of the current wave iteration, which the wave types were set here. So that's why we set these things at the map initialization, so that later on we can reference them easily in one line like that. And we're going to play a sound too. I'm not going to pick like an epic sound or anything, but I'm just going to show you how to do it. So we had a new action, we went to sound, play sound, and click on sound link, and then you could do like tip select. That's not the best sound, but I'm going to use that. And it's going to be for all players since all waves spawn at the same time. And then next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some gold for, not some gold, what am I thinking? I'm living in Warcraft 3's world. We're going to add some minerals for every player every time a wave increases. So we're going to go player group, pick each player in player group like we did earlier for the active players, and we're going to, inside here, do a player, modify player property. We're going to modify player, instead of 0, choose function picked player, and we're going to minerals add, we're not going to add a set amount, we're going to go function math, we're going to use math again, arithmetic integer. We're going to do value 1 is going to be the current wave index, current wave iteration, times 4. So on wave 0 you're going to get nothing, but on wave 1 you'll get, what do you get? You'll get 4, and then wave 2 you'll get 8, and so on like that. So you kind of get more as you play longer because things tend to get more expensive. So I think that's kind of fair, but this is all fine-tuning that you'll have to do if you actually use this. And then next action, make sure you click up here to the top level of that loop. And the next action that we want to do in the trigger is general if then else. And what we're going to do now is check if the left side has players, and then if so, we're going to spawn the units. So if condition comparison, okay, click on the left bracket of owner of triggering unit. And we're going to check if variable, check variable at the top, left has players. Equals value 2, change that to true. So if the left has players equals true, which would have happened in the start here if it detected player 1 or 2, it would have set it to true because it's initially false. So the left side is players, then we're going to, let's see, unit, we're going to create the unit. Create unit facing angle. And we're not just going to create one unit, we're going to create variable wave counts. And instead of wave count 0, we're going to be wave counts current wave iteration. So at wave count 0, it's going to make, I think it was 12, and then on wave counts 1, it's going to make 14 new not so weaklings. And then after that, I don't have anything, so we're just going to endlessly loop the not so weakling hydralisks or whatever. But you'll have to keep adding more waves, of course. You can't just have 2 waves in a tower defense. I mean, that would suck. And the unit we're going to spawn is going to be also a variable. Wave types, current wave iteration. So this is kind of similar to up here. We're getting the wave type based on this list we had set earlier, and for this current iteration. And we're going to spawn these for player 6, because these are going to be coming from the left side. And as you remember, we made player 6 the enemy to player 1 and 2, so he's going to have to control the monsters coming from the left side, or he's going to have to be the owner of them. At point, and we want to do at 0.5, I believe. Yes, at 0.5. Facing doesn't matter. And now we want to order the unit to walk to the opposite end. So the issue with that is that we don't know if this created 1 or if it created many units. So we have to check, because you can, if you order, you can order a unit group and you can order a unit individually, but if you incorrectly order an individual unit as a unit group, it won't do anything, and vice versa. So because we don't know if wave counts is going to be 1, say a boss wave, or if it's going to be 20, say zerglings, we have to do another little if statement in here, unfortunately. So add another if statement after that, make a new condition in the if area, click on the left bracket of owner of triggering unit, and we're going to check if variable wave counts for the current wave iteration is equals to 1. So if it's only one guy that just got spawned, then we're going to order him individually. Unit issue order. We're going to order, and we're going to find last created unit to, and then click on the left bracket of ability command. Make sure you get that. Order targeting point, and click on ability command now and search for move. Choose the move that has move on both sides here, and then the target point is going to be function center of region 001. And then copy paste this and put it in the else block, which will happen if the wave count is not 1, aka a lot of units or no units, although it will never be no units according to my triggers. And double click on this action and change it to be unit issue order to unit group. And I guess it wasn't really that useful to copy paste it, and we're going to order all units in unit group, click on unit group and change it to function last created units. There we go. And then give them the same order, click on the left bracket, order targeting point, search for move, choose move, hit OK. Target point is going to be point function center of region region 1 copy. And I probably should have named those in the region editor. You hit F2 over here and rename them, or you can right click and rename them to be like mob left side exit point or something, if you want to be more adamant about your naming. This is pretty much it for the left side, so we can copy paste this whole giant if thing again below the whole giant if thing, and we're going to make this one to be right has players. So this side will check if the right side has players, is going to spawn the right side stuff. So we're going to create the same amount of the same unit for player 5 at 0.6. Those numbers are weird, I should have switched them around, but anyways. If the wave counts of the current iteration is 1, we're going to order last created unit to move targeting region 1 copy. And same over here. Actually, this shouldn't be region 1 copy. This should be region 1 back up here. Sorry about that, because they should both be on the left side, both be going to region 1. And on the right side, they should both be going to region 1 copy. And that's all we need to do here. And then after this, click on the top level of this if statement and Control W, new action, timer, start a timer. We're going to start that variable again as a one-shot timer that will expire in 30 game time seconds. So now the timer's already cranking out again, so you got to be on your defense pretty fast. And we're going to change the title, add a new action, timer, set title for timer window, set title, and this is where we had the timer window variable here, because last created timer window would do nothing probably. So change it to variable timer window. And the title is going to be next wave in : And one thing now we need to do is last action variable, modify variable integer, modify current wave iteration to be +1. So after all of this, we set it to the next wave so that in 30 seconds, when this timer gets started here, in 30 seconds, this event is going to respond to another expiration of it. And basically this means it's going to endlessly loop. When this expires, it's going to say, oh, we're on wave 2 now, let's go through, and then it's going to +1, so now we're going to be on wave 3, and it's going to go through again in 30 seconds and forever. But the only issue with that is that we only have 2 different types of mobs right now, which is the weakling and the not so weakling, the zergling and the hydralisk, aka. So I'm going to add a little check in here that'll just prevent it from going out of bounds and crashing the map. So we're going to add a new action, another if, sorry, a lot of ifs, but that's how you make more elegant stuff, I guess. And add a new condition in the if block area there, Control W I mean, and click on the left bracket of owner of triggering unit and say if variable current wave iteration is less than, and instead of 1, make it function math arithmetic, and make that value 1 be variable number of waves -1. So if it is less than number of wave -1, we want to drag this action to be here, else we do nothing. So what happens is, if the current wave iteration, let's say we have, let me use an example, we have number of waves is 2, and we start at 0. So the first time this runs through, it's going to reach here, and it's going to say, is 0 less than 2 minus 1? Yes, we're going to increase the wave iteration. It's going to come through again, and it's going to say, is 1 less than 2 minus 1? No, it's not going to increase the wave iteration, and this will never increase, and this will always run and spawn the not so weaklings, because it'll never go higher than 1. And and this will work forever as long as when you add more waves, you increase this number. This will always be safe. It'll always infinitely spawn the last wave, which is good for testing, I guess. In the end, you want to have it so that one team is declared victorious, I guess. But in my case, since I only have 2 waves, I'm just going to say if we hit the max waves, which is 2, or the first index, since this is 0, 1, then we just stop increasing the wave iteration. So these things will constantly keep spawning the same last wave. And that's all we have to do in the spawn trigger. And now we're going to do in the unit death trigger, we're going to update the player kills. So we need to add a new trigger. And this is pretty intense, but if you're keeping along, good for you, because you'll be pretty educated by the end of this. Let's name this trigger unit dies. And the event is going to be when unit dies. Simple enough. But we need to add some conditions, because we need to check that the dying unit was owned by player 5 or 6, the two monster players. So add a new condition, comparison, and change this to be owner of triggering unit equals 5, and triggering unit refers to the dying unit, it says if you click on the event. And copy paste that and make it 6. But now we need to refer to if it's either of those, so we need to add a new condition of type OR, and then drag these under the OR. So in the event that a unit dies, if that unit is either owned by player 5 or player 6, you see that OR there? OR, yeah? Okay. It's going to be OR either of these. And if it's any of those, then the action will be to, let's see, variable, set variable. But now I realize, well, we need some way to store the player kills. We don't have a variable for that yet. So we're going to have to add one down here. Let's call this player kills. And it's going to be an array of size 4, one count for each player, and initial value is 0. And it's of type integer. So when a unit dies, we're going to set, actually, instead of set variable, we're going to do, change this to variable, modify variable integer. We're going to modify player kills, and for which player? Well, function killing player, it actually returns us what's the player number of the killing player, and we're going to increase it by 1. And that'll basically update that, but however, the leaderboard won't be updated, so we need to actually update the text on the leaderboard too. So add a new action, and we're going to do an if statement because the players' positions on the leaderboards are sort of wacky. If, and why don't you actually copy these 2 lines down here, those 2 lines from up there down to here. If it's either, and click on the left bracket, change it to killing player. If killing player is 1, or the killing player is 2, if it's either of those, then we're going to update based on their player number, which is easy enough. Set leaderboard item text. Why did that come back up? And now this is where we choose our variable. Instead of last created leaderboard, we're going to choose variable leaderboard. Set leaderboard item text at column 1. Wrong, we want to do column 2. That's where we had the kills. And row, instead of 1, we can do function killing player, because killing player is just a number. And for player 1, it's going to be on row 1, and for player 2, it's going to be on row 2. And that's why we can't do player 3 and 4 here, because they're on rows 5 and 6, I think. So that would be, they can't be on rows 3 and 4. It can't be that easy. And the text is going to be function conversion, convert integer to text. And you can pretty much convert anything to anything, so by all means take a look at that stuff. Explore the trigger editor, because there's so much good stuff in here. It makes your life a lot easier than a lot of other tools out there. So variable, it's going to be player kills, and for the killing player. And that's all good and done, but now we need to copy this entire if statement inside the else. So what this means is that if it's either player 1 or 2 is the killing player, it's going to do this. Else, it's going to do this. So if it's not player 1 and 2, it's going to go into here. Player 1 or 2, sorry. And then if killing player, delete that. If the killing player is 3, then we want to set the leaderboard item text at column 2 and row 5, I think. Yeah. And then copy this thing and put it in the else of that. And if the killing player is 4, then we want to set it row 6. So it's going to, I hope this makes sense. If killing player was 1 or 2, we're going to do this. But if it was neither, then we're going to go in here and it's going to say, well, was it 3? If it was, it's going to do this. If it wasn't 3 still, it's going to go into the else of this. And it's going to say, was it 4? And if so, yeah. If not, well, it won't do anything then. So And that's all we got to do in here. But there is one problem with this, and this is something you'll find with long-term testing, is that if you have any AoE towers and they kill multiple units or at the same time is what'll happen. So this trigger will actually get run twice, and the player will get 2 kills when they only got 1. I don't know if it's a bug or if it's just the way the engine works, but I'm just warning you ahead of time that this trigger will run twice the way it is right now if an AoE tower weapon kills any sort of unit. So to leverage against that, what I do is I store a custom value on the unit, and when the unit is killed, I set a custom value on it, and then check here if that custom value has changed, because if so, it means this trigger has already been run for that unit, and we can ignore it. So it negates all the multiple runs of the same trigger. And I'll explain that again in a sec here. So back up at the top of the action here, let's add another action, general if then else, new condition in there, comparison, click on the left bracket, change it to be custom value of unit. If the custom value 0 of the triggering unit equals, and I'm going to say 2, I'm making an arbitrary number up here other than 0. If the custom value 0 of this dying unit is 2, then we're going to do then general skip remaining actions. And but now we actually have to set the custom value right after this. So add a new action right after this if statement. Unit set custom value of unit. Set the triggering unit's custom value 0 to 2. So all units have custom values, which is just a number we can attach to a unit that that Blizzard let us do in the trigger editor. It's not even used by them. So and then they could have multiple. You can see custom value 0 here. So, and they're all 0.0 as default. So what happens is the first time this gets run 3 times by some AoE spell, it gets run 3 times on the same unit, which is just a bug in the system. It's going to, first thing it's going to do is check if it's player 5 or 6, okay. And then after that, it's going to check that the custom value is 2. And if so, it's going to skip. But the first time this runs, it's not going to be 2, it's going to be 0. So it's going to not do this action. But then the next action it's going to do is set it to 2. So while this trigger is running, and then this thing might get procced again by the engine, and then it's going to come through again and see, oh, it is 2, and it's going to skip. So what I'm trying to say here is that these actions could get run multiple times on the same unit at the same time, while it's slightly off by like a millisecond. And by doing this, adding this thing here, it'll prevent the second clone run of this trigger from executing, which is a good thing, trust me. I've had issues with people in my original tutorials that couldn't figure out why is my game round triggers running twice when I kill the last unit, because their last tower would actually trigger the death of the last unit twice, and it would run the end of round triggers twice. So that's just a side note for anyone that's advanced enough to understand it, but you will understand it later when you run into this problem with triggers being run multiple times at the same time. And now we can go on to the unit reaches the left side or right side when they reach the end point. We can run into those triggers now. So let's make a new trigger. Call it unit reaches left end. And the event is going to be when a unit enters / leaves a region. Any unit enters, instead of entire map, choose value region 001, which is the left side. And from unit dies, I'm going to copy this condition, owner triggering unit is 5. Actually, I'm going to change that to 6 in here, okay. And so we make sure that the entering unit, and by the way, the entering unit is the triggering unit. The entering unit is owned by player 6, which means he reached the end. The first action we're going to do is modify left lives to be -1. And so now we need to update on the leaderboard right after that. So leaderboard, new action, leaderboard, set leaderboard item text at column 1 and row 3. And actually, instead of doing this all again, let me just delete that. Sorry about that. We can go into initialization, and we can find that action we made. Here it is, left lives. We can copy that over into here. And instead of last create a leaderboard, just make it the variable leaderboard. And now, boom, we don't have to redo that whole thing. That's good to go. It just needs to be known that it needs to be updated. And you could play a sound for player 1 and 2 since this is their side if you wanted. And I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take the sound from spawn waves and paste it in here. And I'm going to play replay slider. That's a crappy sound, and instead of all players, I'm going to convert player to player group, and I'm going to choose player 1 and copy paste this and choose player 2. It's a quick way to do both players because this loss of lives only pertains to the left side. And then now let's remove the unit from the game. So new action unit, remove trigger unit from the game. I'm not using kill because kill will, if you kill the unit, it'll run this trigger, but it'll give an error because it was killed by nobody. So we actually remove it from the game and it avoids any sort of kill trigger. And now we need to check if the lives is 0, because if you lost your life and it's the last one, you need to end the game. So let's add a new action, general if then else again. Once again, another if then else. Aren't you loving those now? Add a comparison in the if block here. Check that, click on the left bracket of owner trigger unit, and let's check that the left lives is less than or equal to 0. Always use less than if you can, rather than just equals to 0. Because sometimes you might have a, a glitch and it might go to -1 or something, so better to be safe and rather than have it skip or something like that. So less than or equal to 0. And the first thing we're going to do inside here is new action trigger, turn the current trigger off. So this, as soon as this won't skip the remaining actions, it'll just prevent this event from getting triggered. So if this is the last guy running through, it's going to turn this trigger off, which means that no further units will trigger this set of actions, but it will still let us finish through the rest of the actions that are currently running. And then next thing we want to do is display a message. So new action UI text message. And we're going to display right wins for all players to the subtitle area. And then we're going to do another new action, general, wait 3 game time seconds. And then we're going to end another new action, game, end game for player, end game in victory for players 3, copy paste for player 4, copy paste for player 1, except change it to defeat now as the value, and defeat for player 2 as well. And that's good, pretty much set here, and we can copy paste this trigger and rename it to be unit reaches right end. And then instead of reaching region 1, they're reaching region 001 copy, in my case. And the owner of the trigger unit has to be owned by 5, so that we make sure it's one of the monsters that made it to this region, not like a builder or something. And we're going to modify the right lives this time. And we're going to update row 7 of the leaderboard. I should probably copy paste this, but anyways, to be right lives : space. And text conversion, instead of left lives, right lives. And now we need to play the sound for players 3 and 4. Okay. Remove the trigger unit, can stay the same. If the right lives is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to turn the current trigger off. We're going to display left wins now. And then we're going to wait 3 seconds, and we need to swap these around because different players won and lost now. Okay, that's swapped around. And the other thing I want to do is copy paste turn current trigger off, and instead of current trigger, change it to value unit reaches the left end, and turn that off. And then copy paste this into the left end trigger and turn off unit reaches right end. So when the left side loses, it's going to turn off its own ending trigger, and it's going to turn off the right side trigger. When the right side loses, it's going to turn off the right side trigger, and it's also going to turn off the left side trigger. So theirs doesn't actually get run after this. That would be weird if the game ended twice, right? And that's pretty much it for the end triggers. And now we're going to do the anti-block, the famed anti-block that people always wanted. So I'm finally going to show you how. Well, I have shown how, but not directly in a tower defense tutorial. So let's make a new trigger, and this is going to blow your mind with how easy this is. And I really like the way it works. It's not like they lose their tower or anything. It's actually preventative. But there are a few constraints, I'll let you know. So let's call this anti-block. And the event is going to be when a unit, where is construction progress? unit construction progress is the event. Any unit construction progress is started. And now the conditions we're going to have to check here. Let's call this anti-block left side. I'm going to split it up so it's a little bit easier to read. So now we're going to add a condition here, comparison. And this is going to be that instead of owner trigger unit, we're going to do the triggering player. Where's that? So if the triggering player is 1 or 2, and you heard me say or, so we need to add another condition of or, and put these two into there. And so any unit starts construction progress. The triggering player refers to the player that owns that unit. So if it's player 1 or 2, and now is where we do the check. So we need to add a new condition, and instead of triggering player equals 2, we're going to do point, and this is an interesting function that exists, pathing cost between points. But there's a problem. We don't want to do or for all of this. So here's a bit of logic I'm going to throw at you right now. We actually want to, at the top level of conditions, add a new condition of and then we want to drop this or into the and then drop this pathing cost above the or it could be below, just make sure it's not in it. Make sure it's outside of it. So we're going to say we want these two conditions to be true. By putting this and here, this and wants these two to be true, and this or wants either of these to be true. So if we're to, the humane way to read this is if it's either player 1 or player 2, and the pathing cost between the point 5 and the center of region 001 equals to 65,536, which means there's no pathing cost, then we're going to prevent the player from building. So let me add those actions in, and then I'll kind of summarize what we just did. We're going to unit, remove unit from the game, remove, and the unit is actually triggering progress unit, refers to the constructed unit. You can find that out in the event. And we're going to display a message to the player saying, you blocked, tower destroyed, or tower, let's say, refunded. And not all players, we want to do that to the convert player to player group, function, triggering player. And so when construction progress is started, so right when you drop a tower, you won't even see a drop basically, is what this trigger will do, but we check that the pathing cost between, and this is for the left side, right? So the pathing cost between 0.5 and the center of this region, if that's equal to 65,536, which means that there is no path available, it's the max number possible. If it's this number and it's either player 1 or player 2 that was building, then we're going to remove that building from the game and tell them that they blocked, and we're going to give them a refund. So I hope that makes sense by putting the and the or together. If I only wanted to check for player 1, I could just go like this. Bada boom, done. We want it to be player 1 and but unfortunately player 1 and 2 build here. So we want to check if either of these players is building, and that the pathing cost between those 2 points is that number. That means that there's a problem, and we need to remove that blocking unit from the game. So this I've pretty much had this flawlessly working in production on an actual TD. So, but that goes back to how we set up our footprint on our towers to be square. And that's all we want to set here, and we want to do a refund, right? So we're going to do player. This is some clever math here. We're going to modify player property. We're going to modify player function, triggering player. Minerals, we're going to add function instead of 1,000, unit type cost, minerals cost of unit type, function unit type of unit type of triggering unit, triggering progress unit, sorry. And we want to actually put this before the remove, because the remove might cause triggering progress unit to not be existing, and then it'll crash, or it'll give an error. So that's pretty much the anti-block for left side though. So now we got to copy paste this and change it for the right side. Okay, so let me just copy paste and rename this to anti-block right side. And we're going to check that the pathing cost between 0.6 now and the center of region 1 copy is that crazy number. And we're going to check that it was player 3 or player 4 that was the building player. aka the triggering player, and then we're going to add back their minerals. We're going to remove that unit from the game, and we're going to display to them you blocked. So most of this is still the same, it's just this that had to change. And the last two actions are going to be the player leaves the game and player sells a tower. So on the left side here, let's add a new trigger. Let's call this player leaves game. And the event of this is going to be player leaves the game. Player leaves the game with any. So you can't actually choose disconnect here, but if you put any, it'll actually react to when they disconnect. And Blizzard actually changed that for us after the beta, which was really nice of them. Let's see. So now when any player leaves, we're going to do the action. We're going to wait a second, just to have some buffer time before we end the game. And let's see. We're going to add a new if then else again. I know you probably hate those by now, but that's the way it goes. So the condition inside the if here is going to be a comparison, and we're going to check that the let's see, status of player, where is it? We're basically doing the game over rule here. So if the status of player 1 is not equal to, that exclamation equals is not equals to preset playing, and copy this, and player 2. If it's both of these, so let's add a new and condition in here, and I'm going fast so you can just watch and then do it yourself after. So if it's and this or and player 3 and 4, but we need to put an or for both of those because we need to check if it's either of those. So we're going to put that in there and drop that below the other and. So it's like that. So if either of player 1 and player 2 are not playing, or player 3 and player 4 are not playing at this point after this last person's left, and that's why this buffer time is here, just so that they're fully disconnected from the game. There's no, if we did it too fast, it might still think they're playing. So we're checking that either player 1 and player 2 are not here, or either player 3 and player 4 are not here. If either of those things are true, then we're going to end the game. So because that means that there's one side's gone. So UI text message game over exclamation mark for all players, and then we're gonna wait 3 seconds so we have some buffer time for people to say GG or whatever people like to say at the end anyway in their crazed anger. Player group, click each players in active players, and we're going to do game, end the game for player, in a tie for player, not player 1, for picked player. So we're going to pick everybody and just end the game in a tie for them, and that's it. Get out of the game. It's over. It's done. And then I'm going to save here, and now let's do the and let's do one more thing. Before this, wait 1 second. Let's actually update the leaderboard, so it's a little nice thing. So we can actually go into our unit dies, I think. Yeah. Let's copy this giant long if thing we did here, because this will actually save us some time. So in player leaves the game, before the wait 1 second, let's say if the killing, no, we don't want to do that. If I think it's triggering player we can use. I don't think they approve. Oh, they do approve of triggering player. Good. Does it actually say we can use triggering player? Yes, it does. Nice. So if the triggering player is, sorry, I was just going nuts there in my head. If the triggering player is player 1 or 2, then we can set the column 1 leaderboard text and row of triggering player to be just a value. Just say left the game. It can stay in their color though. We're going to leave the color the same so you know what color was there, that they were still there. And if the not killing player, if the triggering player was 3, then we're going to set the column 1 and row 5 to be value left the game. And then if triggering player was 4, then we're going to set the row 6, column 1 and row 6 to be left the game. Come on, left the game. Okay, and that's just a little nice touch, so you know when your ally left or something. If you had more players, it'd be probably even more helpful. And now let's add the selling trigger, and then we're almost done, and we'll test out and see how many things I screwed up. And maybe it won't be anything this time. Maybe I'll get lucky. Player sells towers, what we'll call this trigger. The event will be when a unit uses ability. Any unit uses search for cell. You can see our ability. At execute stage, make sure you set that. If you leave it as any, this trigger might get runs once when it preempts, executes, and completes, which will make this trigger run 3 times, which is not a good idea. And what we're going to do is one simple little line, which is new action here, player, modify player property. We're going to modify not player 0, function triggering player. And we're going to modify the minerals. We're going to add, and we're going to do some math here. Function math arithmetic integer. We're going to add the function unit type cost, minerals cost of unit type, function unit type of unit type of the triggering unit, which happens to be the unit that just used cell. And we're going to divide that by 2, because remember we said I think 50% is what you get back on your tower. So this is just dividing the cost of the unit over 2. And that's pretty much it. So why don't we go test and see how good I did this. Okay, as you can see, the leaderboard looks pretty good. The wave timer is going, and I got the two race choosing here. And I'm going to start out with the sun team just to make sure they work. And let's see, I got the sun builder. I can build a sun shooter, and the hotkeys ironically are B and S for build. And I'm going to drop this right here. Okay, it's shooting nicely. Everything worked out nicely on that. And let me try selling. Nice, I just got 3. And now if I build, watch, I'm going to try and block, and you're going to watch what happens. So this one will block. It prevented me. It actually refunded me and said, you blocked, your tower refunded. You can keep spamming it, try whatever you want, but it's not going to work. And oh boy, these guys are hard. And you can see the waves talking there. And I did lose 10 lives, unfortunately. And I'm going to wait till I lose here. So let me just sell these towers off, so I lose a lot faster. And then I'll go test the shadow team and make sure that all works. And then you'll pretty much be on your way. You can just expand from this, from what I've shown you, and hopefully add some more in-depth stuff like upgrades, tiers, unlocking, make your add mini games like Skibbies did back in Warcraft 3. Who knows? And the right side wins, technically. Well, technically I lost by myself, but it's always good to have a single player component, even if your map is like a multiplayer TD, because if you're sitting at the bottom of the popularity list and 2 people, them and their friend, or 1 person on his own wants to try it, it helps if you can give them some content so they can't just sit there and they'll be like, sorry, you only have 1 person, you can't play. Anyways, I'm on the shadow team. I can see the shadow blade guy. I'm going to play some and just check that their sounds and their weapons are all right. Yep, they're shooting all right. That's kind of cool. So yeah, just create cool creative stuff like that. But that's pretty much it. Beyond this, I think everything works here. But beyond this, you'd pretty much just look at game variants. Look at my tutorial on game variants for publishing to Battle.net. That's how you set up like your player slots, your lobbies, your stuff like that, and then you pretty much publish. And there's stuff on SC2 Maps about that. And thanks for watching, and sorry for the long delay on a remake of a tower defense tutorial, but I hope this was enjoyed and not too boring and long, even though it was relatively long. But anyways, thanks for watching.